is the Abaddon Planet Podcast, episode 67. I'm your host, Joel Abaddon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. Today on the podcast is my friend, Jeff Wanko. Now, Jeff is a math teacher educator. He's a friend. He's a mentor. I'm going to gush on him at the beginning of the episode. You're going to hear a little bit about his background, or a lot of bit about his background. But one thing I didn't know about Jeff until later on in our relationship together as mentor and friend and whatever is he's a puzzle maker. He likes to think about, and he's been fascinated with puzzles for most of his life, and has gotten so far into it that he's a creator of puzzles, and he has books on puzzles, and it's like one of those things like, what? And then, so that knowledge is there, and then at the same time, we have this kind of Wordle craze that is coming up. So if you just in case there's someone out there that has not heard of a Wordle, so there's a website, you go to Wordle.com. Now it goes to New York Times because it's so popular. New York Times bought it for their puzzles. Anyway, and you have to guess a five-letter word in 6 tries. And when you guess a letter that's not in the right place, it turns into a yellow. There's a yellow blocks there. And then if you guess something that's in the right place, it's green. And so when you're done, you have this hopefully when you finish within, I like to do it within four, but 6 if I'm desperate. But you'll see the full green blocks. And so that's why, on social media, and I was one of those that were like, what are all these pictures of green and yellow, gray blocks that people are posting on social media and saying, 4 out of 6 or 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 6. And I'm like, what was that? And I was one of the foolish people that had to Google what is a Wordle. And now I can't get enough. And there's a lot of people that can't get enough. And now there's not only is there Wordle, there's Worldle, which is WORLDLE, which is where you try to guess. You give you a country and you try to guess in a number of steps what a country that's the outline of the country that's in black, and you're trying to guess based on the outline where that country is, and then it'll give you a direction and a distance for where that country is in the world, and that's kind of fun. And so that's another offshoot of this sort of puzzle craze. And then there's Nerdle, where you're trying to guess an equation in, I believe, 6 steps, and the same sort of thing where it gives you notes like, hey, these operations are there, these numbers are there, these numbers aren't there, or these are in the right spot or versus the wrong spot. That's another one. Quirtle is 4 Wordles at the same time. I've done that, and that was a recommendation from Jeff that you hear, and he actually has ones where you do 8 Wordles at the same time, and there's 16 Wordles at the same time. It's like, this is getting crazy. So anyway, puzzles are out there. Puzzles are made, and I think one of the things that came out with the pandemic was people started doing the New York Times crossword puzzles, and you could do it in a certain time and compare times with each other. There's this thing about puzzles that has been going on forever, right? And so thinking about that, and then also seeing some of the creativity on how people are taking advantage of this craze, like what teachers are doing in classrooms with puzzles. And so I always wanted to have Jeff on to talk about puzzles and talking about teaching with puzzles, but it just kind of coincides with this kind of Wordle craze that's going on at the same time as well. So it's a great conversation. I loved having it. I ordered Jeff's 2 books. They weren't there in time, so I could see it. But I mean, the same things that what he's talking about in today's episode, and he's talking about his future book, so his 3rd book on puzzles. I'm seeing it right now in some of these other 2 books that he has too. So it's a great resource. It's a way to get at thinking and teaching and some of the stuff we want to do in math education especially, but even the idea of risk-taking. Like, kids are willing to take a risk in a game, and this could be a low-bar way to get kids to I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to try and figure things out. I'm going to use some logic here on the structure of either if it's a Nerdle for an equation or for this, for what letters go together in a word. And so now that eliminates possibilities. And anyway, puzzles are fun, puzzles are engaging, and now we get a chance to talk to an expert on puzzles and thinking about how do you teach with puzzles. And he's got some great ideas, and I can't wait for you, and I'm talking too much. So without any further delay, here's my conversation with Jeff Wanko. My friend, my colleague, my mentor, Jeff Wanko.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's here.
That's a lot.
He's here in the Abaddon Planet Podcast. Thanks, Jeff, for joining me. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you. Thank you, Joel.
I could have put hero. Hero?
No.
Scholar?
You can stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Just
it's all good.
piling
No,
them
that's
up.
really odd.
Jeff, it is. I mean, wow, it is an honor to have you on the podcast. I'm not just saying that. And like, I've never just said it to anyone out there, never just said that, but it is an honor. I mean, we go back. I'm looking at my service teaching and research in math education, like bandana. It's up on the wall from 2012. We were part of that's where we met. I was a part of a fellowship program that was sponsored by NSF, by Barb and Bob Reese. They set up this program to help young and up and coming math ed researchers figure out what does it mean to do this job. And when we got there, you were one of the smiling faces to greet us when we joined that program. And since then we've had a wonderful, like again, mentor mentee, but then colleague, and I would say even friend, Jeff.
You bet, Joel. You've got it. You hit the nail on the head. I love it. Can you give a little bit of background to who you are, how you got to your position there up in Ohio at the other Oxford? At the Oxford.
Whoa. All right.
It's in Oxford. No. So I'm at Miami University, which is in Oxford, Ohio. And so it's a great place to be. This is my 22nd year on faculty here. And it's also where I attended as an undergraduate. So it's kind of an old home for me. It's great for me to be around here. And I really do enjoy the town. I enjoy the university. It's been a great place for me.
And so what are your titles, Jeff? Yeah, I want to know, like, because they pile up.
Titles. So right now my title is professor. That's my title. So I've had 3 different administrative positions up until now, but right now I am serving as a professor. So I am back on faculty and doing the good work of teaching and service and research. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you were in the provost's office for a little while.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah, the past 4 years, I served as an associate provost. Before that, I was a department chair, and before that, I was an associate dean here in the College of Education, Health and Society. So.
Well, and I know you have, and I've seen your leadership abilities, your abilities to work with others, and again, lead people to figure out what they're doing with their pathways with regards to math education and the people that were in the STAR program. But then also knowing too, you have a passion for teaching as well. So I know that this is, yes, thank you for serving in those capacities, but I'm sure your students are delighted that they have more access to you as a professor.
It's really kind of fun, Joel. Actually, a lot of the students didn't even know who I was in the last 4 years. And even some of the years before that. So as an associate provost, I wasn't teaching at all. It was a full-time administrative gig. Yeah. And so I wasn't teaching anything. So the students didn't really know that much about me, other than some students who I would meet through student government and some other things. I would teach a first-year seminar for education majors and other majors in our division. So I got to meet a number of students that way, but it wasn't really focused on just teaching or teaching math education stuff. So that was it's really great. I'm teaching a couple of courses right now. I've got one course that's on STEM ways of thinking. So that's been a ton of fun for me to put that together. Working with colleagues in other STEM fields across the university, pulling in their expertise and developing some resources here for our students. And then I'm also teaching a course in our middle childhood program here, which is for grades 4 through 9 in Ohio, a course on mathematics, history, and technology. So basically, we had things that we needed to get covered for accreditation for technology, and things we need to get covered for history of mathematics. And we didn't have a good place to put those as entire courses in and of themselves. We didn't have enough room in the program. So we combined them. And I taught this course about 3 or 4 times before I started to do some other things. And so when I was tagged to teach this course this semester, I went back, pulled up an old syllabus. Joel, the syllabus that I pulled up was from spring of 2007. So 15 years ago, the last time I taught this course on technology and history, and the history hasn't changed, but man, the technology has. And so that's been a ton of fun for me to put stuff together for that class.
Oh, yeah.
So so I'm getting to teach some classes like this and reconnecting with a lot of students.
Yeah, just thinking back to my own education at the University of Wisconsin. I think I might have told you this. I had the TI, was it 92 plus? It was the world destroyer. It looked like something like Tony Stark would have invented.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
And we had to not only buy that, but buy the flash add-on chip to put into it. So you could do the geometry to drag. And I think there was a Geometry Sketchpad addition to there. And now what's incredible is all those tools that had all the technology and software that you had to purchase or a device you had to purchase and stuff like that. Now, you think of it, it's pretty, I don't know if it's exactly as powerful, but the tools that are available free, available out there, with Desmos and Codap and all these sorts of the GeoGebra, it's just kind of amazing. So it's almost like the door is open to using technology and accessing it.
Yeah. I look back at my syllabus from 15 years ago, and I was showing kids some basics about using Excel as a spreadsheet. Yeah. And then I was also teaching lessons on Geometry Sketchpad and Fathom.
Yes.
And
Fathom, yeah.
Those are just great tools. But for crying out loud, we've got so much that is much less expensive. And I really think it's a lot more powerful now. Yeah. So Desmos, we were just doing a lesson in class yesterday around some Desmos tools and looking at some other online calculators. We took a look at Wolfram Alpha, and the students were just blown away by some of the things that they could do there, and had no idea that was possible. So it's really important when we're talking with future teachers to help them to know what some of the technology is right now, and to be prepared for what may be coming, because they've got to know what their students are going to have access to, to help to move forward with some ideas, but also just so that they can be prepared in knowing that their students are going to be having access to some of these other tools, and don't just assume that they can do the same kind of lessons or the same kind of problems that they maybe had been thinking about before.
Yeah, excellent. And so thinking about that and thinking about the creative thinking that's available, the thing that kind of sparked this conversation about for this podcast is I saw you had a little Facebook post out there where you're saying, hey, does anyone like to look at some puzzles? And I knew you'd done research on puzzles, and I didn't know how extensive it was, but you're like, hey, here's some puzzles, go ahead and try them out. And if you do them, rank them and send them. And I think you guys gave me that first set, and I finished it in I don't know, hour or so. I couldn't put them down. And that's hey, you want some more? I'm like, yeah, I'll take some more. And then, but just this idea of puzzles. And so I know you have a passion for puzzles, and I know it's been for a long time, but why puzzles? Why would a math teacher educator care about puzzles?
So just for me historically, puzzles were the thing that really hooked me onto mathematics when I was in fourth grade. It was something that just got me excited. In fact, do you remember those Scholastic order forms for Scholastic books? Yeah. Yeah. I was always so excited to get those. And in fourth grade, we got one time, and there was a book in there called Perplexing Puzzles and Tantalizing Teasers. And I'm like, that's got to be the greatest title ever in the world, And it was a Martin Gardner book, and I had no idea who Martin Gardner was. I ordered this book, a paperback, got it, and I lived in this book. Right, this was, each page you turn it, and there's something else different, and it's there's some wordplay, there's just some funny riddles, interesting old school kind of situations, but also it was, there were pictures like, could you draw this thing without lifting your pencil? Right. All of that kind of stuff. And it just got me really intrigued. And so that was, for me, that was kind of the start of things. And so I by the time I was in middle school, I started getting Games Magazine. So back in the day, Games Magazine premiered, I think like in 78, 79, when I was in upper elementary or lower middle school grades. And I started getting that magazine. And I continue to still get that magazine, although it has gone through some different iterations. It's now Games World of Puzzles, but it's a magazine that really got me interested in tons and tons of different things, all sorts of new kinds of puzzles, and basically, two types for me. There are the language dependent puzzles, like a crossword puzzle. I think crossword puzzles are absolutely amazing. Tons of really good stuff, but very much language and culture dependent puzzles.
Right.
All right. So those were the puzzles that I think a lot of people are mostly familiar with. And then what I come to call the language independent logic puzzles. So basically, the big kahuna there is Sudoku. So it's a puzzle where if you know the rules, you could go pick up a magazine in any country, any place across the world, and see a Sudoku puzzle and go, I know what this is. I can do this. So it's language independent, and it's also a type of a logic puzzle. So I always had that kind of in the back of my mind, that was something that I really enjoyed. I really liked doing these, and I really liked the mathematics that was behind them. And when I was a middle school teacher, so my former life was a 7th and 8th grade math teacher for 6 years. You were a former high school teacher, is that correct?
Yeah, 9th grade. So not that far away from that. Yeah.
Excellent. So I was teaching middle school. I started to bring in puzzles into my classroom, and I started to use them with my students every once in a while, just something for fun. And I learned a really important lesson is not everybody is as excited about puzzles as I am. So that was that was my first foray into that. I'm like, oh, okay. So some students really like this. Some students don't. Some students, it opens up some things for some students who maybe have not been successful in mathematics and maybe some other ways, more traditional ways, but maybe there are some logic puzzles that can really interest some students and where they can be successful. And, there are those logic puzzles where you've got the grid and you're trying to fill in, like which neighbor has this last name and like which occupation. Yeah. I used to do those all the time. And when I say a logic puzzle, that's what people think about. But since then, I've really learned that there are a ton of other types of puzzles that are logic based, and many of them have some mathematics to them that make them really kind of interesting and really kind of fun in some ways. All right. So when I was starting then as a mathematics education faculty member, I was doing all of my regular work and publishing and doing things. And then once I got tenured, that's when they said, well, now you can start to look at some other things that maybe you've had in the back of your mind. And so that's where I said, I've always really wanted to look at how maybe these kinds of puzzles could be used in a classroom. So here's where I started to then dig into that. I developed an inventory to use to look at people's deductive reasoning skills, pre-test, post-test kind of thing. And then I would develop lessons for teachers to use with kids that would explore how kids think about these deductive reasoning puzzles. And then they would use them in their classrooms. And then after some number of weeks, they would give the kids a post-test and look at the growth in kids' deductive reasoning skills. And I thought that was really pretty cool. I thought that was great. But then I started to delve into some other things, and that's where stuff has really blown up here for me in a really positive way. So I've gotten to do some other work. One of the things that's really interested me is many of these puzzles come from Japan, and so I've started to investigate Japanese logic puzzles specifically as a subgenre, and many of these puzzles originate in Japan. You think about Sudoku, for example. That name is a Japanese phrase, but the fun part about that is it did not originate in Japan. It's a U.S. Product. Actually, there was a retired architect from Indiana who made the first Sudoku puzzle back in 1979. And it was published in the Dell magazine, and it was something that got some attention, but didn't really catch on until the mid 80s when this Japanese puzzle magazine called Nikolai they got it. They got a hold of it. They said, this is really pretty cool. Can we use this? And they're like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And then from there, they renamed it Sudoku. And then when computers were designed to have some programs on computers to generate a lot of Sudoku puzzles, that's when they started to appear in newspapers in the 90s. And then the rest is history from there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, keep going.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, so I find Sudoku to be very interesting. It was it's kind of the gateway into looking at these logic puzzles for people, but it's a puzzle that I don't really look at that much. In fact, a course that I have taught here.
Why not? Well, it's just because it's so popular. Why not?
Because everybody does them. Everybody does them, right?
Yeah.
And I am not that fast at Sudoku. It takes me some time to look at some of the different strategies and stuff. But I persevere. I think that's pretty important. But there are people who are just absolute whizzes in the world of puzzle solving. And I don't want to dip my toe in those waters. Really, what I want to do is look at other things. And so a course that I've developed here at Miami University, I've taught 3 or 4 times so far. It's called Beyond Sudoku. All right. So I think that what I'm trying to get at here is there are tons of other things that are available. And Sudoku's like I said, it's a great way to get started. But man, there's so much more that you can do that digs into some visual logic and deductive reasoning and some other aspects as well. I think it's just really pretty amazing.
All right. So good. You piggybacked right into, just led me right to this next question here, Jeff.
That's why I'm here, Joel.
That's perfect. So people are like, well, what are these other puzzles? And I think maybe the next popular, I wonder if you think is like Ken. Is that like maybe the next most popular puzzle?
The story of Ken, it was developed by a Japanese middle school math teacher. So there was a teacher who wanted to challenge his students and give them something more than just rote problems or exercises to do in class. And so he developed this little puzzle where he put these things in grids, similar to Sudoku, where you've got one of each number in every row and every column. But what he did from there is he made other little regions, little cells or little blocks of numbers in which he would tell people the product of these numbers is 72, or the difference between these two numbers is 3. And so with those kinds of clues, you don't even need to be given any starting numbers like you do in a Sudoku puzzle, right. But you can go through and do some of that kind of stuff. So yeah, a Ken, and by the way, Ken is a Japanese word that means wisdom.
Nice.
And so when you put it in a square, you get Ken, you get wisdom squared.
Nice.
So that's where that name came from.
All right. So those are two that I think, and the only reason I say those is I think those would, and I don't know if they have these magazines anymore, but the magazines you find on the airplanes, like you would see those two puzzles usually in there. So, but right. What are you have a big database of, or you have experience with a variety of these different kinds of puzzles. So name, I said 3, but name your top puzzles that you'd want to share with us. Because I know you shared some with me and I have a favorite, but I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. All right. Awesome. So there are lots of really great puzzles, and this is a real pat answer, but my favorite puzzle is the one that I'm working on right then. Right. So it's whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm going to do better than that, Joel. I'm going to do better. I promise. But, lately,
the puzzle of life.
Yeah. Lately, the puzzle that has intrigued me a lot is a puzzle called Star Battle. So in a Star Battle puzzle, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
no, I think you sent me. That's the last
one that I sent you.
Yep.
Right. So it's one where you're given a grid. Typically, it might be 6x6 grid, 8x8, 10x10, whatever. And the standard puzzle is you've got to put 1 star in every row, 1 star in every column. This is, sounding an awful lot like Sudoku, right? Where you got 1 of each number in every row and every column. But in a Star Battle puzzle, the puzzle is also broken down into little regions where they might be a a region of 4 squares, and it doesn't have to be a straight line. It could be a square. It could be a zigzag. It could be a letter T, whatever. It might be a region that has 20 squares in it. I mean, there are all sorts of different sizes, and they're all kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, jigsaw puzzle,
That's
fitting them all together in a grid. And so the other rule is that every one of those regions has to have exactly 1 star in it as well. So 1 star appears in every row, 1 star appears in every column, 1 star appears in every region, the outlined region in the grid. And one final rule is that no 2 stars can be touching each other. All right. So with those rules in mind, every star battle puzzle that you would work on has exactly 1 solution. And that to me is one of the most intriguing pieces of doing these puzzles, is that every single puzzle that you get has exactly 1 solution. And that's the challenge for the puzzle designer, to create a puzzle that has exactly 1 solution and has kind of guideposts along the way to help the solver think about, what's the next step that I can do? What is another strategy that I could use to work on this puzzle?
Yeah, that one is interesting, because I was like, at the beginning, I was like, well, this can't be that hard. But then they're like, oh, like I'm trying, positioning, because I'm moving the paper back and forth, trying to see like rows and columns. Like, oh, now that I know that this huge, where could I put a star in this huge region? And then it's like, well, if I can't put it there, because that's the only option for this region, and I can't put it there because there's 2 regions there, and that's there. I really am limited. It has to go right here. Like that's great.
And one of the things about a star battle puzzle is it's more important to start with not figuring out where a star goes, but where a star cannot go. Mm-hmm. And it's when you think about some of, say, Polya's problem solving strategies, right? It's one of them is to eliminate possibilities. Right. So when you eliminate all of the other possibilities and only have one thing left, then that has to be the correct answer. And so that's one of the strategies that is used in thinking about a star battle puzzle. If I've got a region that has 5 squares in it, and I can eliminate 4 of those for one reason or another that could not have a star in them, then the only one that's left has to have a star in it.
Yeah, and I think gets me thinking like with statistical reasoning, or like those null hypotheses and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if it can't be this, it's not this, but then it must be that. It's like that same sort of reasoning, that you have, and it's like we need to be promoted. Like it's okay to not. Yeah, we might not have the exact answer to nail it right at the beginning, but we can eliminate some other things. Like that's great. It's great practice for people to engage in.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I started to think about, Joel, with all these puzzles is, are they helpful with, say, middle school kids to develop deductive reasoning skills so that before they take a math course in school that relies on deductive reasoning, a proof-based course or something, like the standard geometry course, if students did more of these kinds of, I kind of think of them as more informal deductive reasoning activities, could that help them to be successful in a more standard, traditional deductive reasoning based course? And my hypothesis is yes, that it can. But that is one research study I've not engaged in yet.
Yeah. Well, we're looking for it. We'll have you on next year, and we'll be able to report out.
Just next year. Okay, thanks.
What about the L-shaped one?
Oh man,
is that one of your favorites?
That is. There's one that Joel's talking about here. It's called Sashigane. Again, this is a Japanese puzzle. Sashigane is one where the region that you're given, all right, you're also given a region that's already broken down into some smaller regions. And each of those regions, though, that you see now, all have a specific kind of shape. They're all L shapes, like what Joel was mentioning. And so what you have are all these different L's, and an L might be, one leg might be 4 units long, the other leg might be 7 units long on a large grid, or you might have an L that's just like 2 units long on each side. But they're all L shapes. And by the way, the width of each of those legs of those L's are all just 1 unit wide. Okay. But the whole grid that you're shown from the very beginning is all these different L shapes. And actually, that is the solution, not what you're shown from the very beginning. Your goal is to create L shapes.
Yes.
So what you're trying to do now is to break the whole grid down into these L shapes and see how they might fit together. But you're given all sorts of clues inside the grid. Like you might be given a circle with a number in it. And that circle with a number in it is something it tells you the total number of squares that is in a specific L. Like if you see a 3 with a circle in it, you know that L is going to be just 3 units long. 2 up on one side and then 1 over on the other side.
Which that's a good hint, because you know that there's only one shape for that one, right? It's got to be one shape for that. Yeah.
That's right. But if you got a bigger number, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to think about some of your different options. However, none of the L's when you're done can overlap each other. None of the L's can go outside the grid. I mean, they have to fill the entire grid. That's the other part about this puzzle. You may also be given some other clues. In some of the puzzles, they have little arrows, and the arrows you'll find out all are the endpoints of different L's, and they're all pointing in toward the center, the bend in the elbow of the L itself. So you're given some different clues like that, but you're not given all the clues. You're just given some subset of clues. In fact, the subset of clues that you're given is just enough, usually, to find the one single solution for the puzzle. So there are some really, really interesting designs that come about with this. And I want to mention about how this magazine, Nikolai, comes about publishing these kinds of puzzles. So this is a puzzle that I saw in Nikolai maybe about 10 years ago or so.
How do you spell that, Jeff?
Nikolai is Nikoli.
All right.
And in this magazine, they would first publish a small region, a small half of a page with 3 of these puzzles and one example. And all of the directions are in Japanese, which I cannot read. So they would publish these and they would say, what do you guys think about this? And they would get feedback from readers. Okay. They would get feedback from readers, and readers might say, I really like this puzzle. Have you thought about adding this other rule? Or maybe this rule is too much. So it was kind of this collective development of these puzzles. And so once a puzzle would go through this, they would kind of call out some of the different puzzles. There'd be puzzles that were not very popular, so they would just stop with those. But when a puzzle reaches kind of its maximum interest in the readers, they would develop it into this full-on regular puzzle that would be featured then as a regular appearance in their magazine. So, which I think is really awesome.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's all. I mean, just thinking about, the agency that gives to those that engage with that space, right? That like
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I want to mention real quickly here then this idea about when I first was picking up these magazines and they were in Japanese, and I don't read the Japanese characters at all, but I would see one example. There'd be one example of the puzzle with the puzzle and its unique solution. It'd be something small, usually like a 5x5 or something like that. And there wouldn't be anything else there. And if I didn't, go online or something and try to look up what I thought maybe these rules would be, if I was just trying to figure it out, before I would go to one of my friends who does read Japanese and get their assistance, I would try to look at that one puzzle myself and see if I could figure out what I thought all the rules are for the puzzle. And so usually then what I would do is in an early appearance of this puzzle, I'd go to the back of the magazine and look at a few more examples, not to see what is the solution, but can I inductively figure out what I think all the rules are for the puzzle just by looking at 2, 3, 4 examples. So in what I sent you that you saw on Facebook was really the after effect of once you're given all the rules and you are asked to deductively figure out solutions to all these puzzles. What you haven't seen yet, Joel, is before that, I do an inductive activity with teachers and with students where I give them 3 examples of a puzzle. Here is a puzzle. Here's its unique solution. Here's another puzzle. Here's its unique solution of that same type. and then a third one. And then what I have teachers do is an activity with the students to say, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you notice about some of these different puzzles? Is that enough? What are some things that you observe? And is that enough to have a full set of rules that will give exactly one solution for each of these puzzles?
Wow. I mean, that, again, great.
So,
I mean, just that blows my mind already. Like, you're like, hey, let's figure, versus like, here, I want you to go do this, versus like, what do you think we have to do? Like that, that's just
right.
Opens the mind.
So that to me has been the big kind of second phase of my work with puzzles, is that's opened things up to me. And it all developed out of my own struggles with looking at a Japanese puzzle and not having an idea what the rules were, but trying to figure them out myself. And then I realized that I could use this as an application of the difference between inductive reasoning, figuring out what you think the rules are, and then deductive reasoning. Then once you know the rules, now can you figure out how to solve all these different puzzles?
Jeff, I wonder, like, would you see some connections, like, with how, students or young people, or, I mean, I'll point to myself, like, because I grew up with a video game machine. It was a Nintendo. But, like, you would get the video game, you throw it in, and you just try to figure out, well, what's the goal here? What am I trying to accomplish? Ooh, my character did not make it there, so I like not to fall in the pit. Okay, don't fall in the pit. That's a rule, right? Or just trying to think like all these different things and to figure that out. And then like, oh, now I might need some help. I go to the manual or try to do some other investigations. But like having that sort of exploratory sort of mindset towards like, what am I trying to do here?
Mm-hmm. To me, that's one of the aspects of mathematics that I think we don't do enough of in schools is letting kids explore, letting kids kind of figure things out. And I love kind of an investigative approach to mathematics where kids aren't told you need to use this strategy to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, this goes back to my days here. When I was a graduate student at Michigan State, I was working on the development of the Connected Math Project. And I learned from Glenda Lappin, I learned from Betty Phillips and Bill Fitzgerald and everybody else there about the value of an investigative approach to mathematics. And I just found that to be absolutely fascinating. And so I think that really did have some influence in how I'm going about doing these puzzles now. It's great to know what all the rules are, but I really, really like this aspect of, can you figure out what you think the rules are here? And the first time I do that with a group of, let's say, classroom teachers, some of them will be bothered by that to say, just tell me what the rules are. I want to do this. And then after they play with this for a little bit, they really like that kind of investigative approach, that idea of what do you notice and what can you figure out about this? I think it's really a ton of fun. And so that's the way I've gone about doing these puzzles now.
Well, and then almost, I mean, to go really far, like thinking about the advanced math, when the most advanced I ever took was like a modern algebra class where you like, hey, what if we assumed these were the rules of this mathematical world? What's true about it? What happens? Like, what do things connect in certain ways? And it's like it's almost like you were playing in these like weird hypothetical math spaces and to see what that world's like. And it seems like we can do that same thing in this puzzle world. Like, what do we think the rules are? And it's play. It is, we're playing in these spaces. That's, I don't know. You got me thinking now, Jeff. This is
all right.
Well,
good. Joel, that's always one of my goals, is to help get you thinking, because I love what comes out after you start thinking about things. So.
That's right. So, I mean, you have, so there's another idea. Well, okay. I'm interrupting you. Keep going.
No, please go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, so like you've already like kind of opened up like, hey, here's one way you could use puzzles to teach. And like, where like, especially these ones that maybe kids have not seen before, like the Star Battle or something like that. And then allowing them some agency to think like, here, maybe the rules are, and see like what the solutions are. And then possibly even then if you're really going for it, kids are making their own puzzles, making their own even rules for types of puzzles. So how do you, what are other things that you have either teachers do with puzzles or you've done with puzzles?
Oh my gosh. All right. Just tons of stuff. So before we go there, could I just mention a third puzzle that I want to circle back?
Yeah. Please.
Yeah. So a third puzzle that was for me the clincher for doing this is a puzzle that's called Shikaku.
Okay.
And Shikaku is a puzzle where when you're first given the grid, it's just a square grid, and it's got numbers and circles throughout the grid. And what your goal is to break the whole grid down into rectangles, where each rectangle has one of those numbers in it, and that number represents the area of that rectangle. So it's got some similarity to the Sashigane puzzle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's much more basic. And what I love about this one, Joel, is that you can talk about a bunch of other mathematical concepts. You can talk about factor pairs. All right. So if you see a number 12 in the grid, you've got to include that number 12 in a rectangle that is maybe 2 by 6 or 3 by 4, or even if it's in a bigger grid, a 1 by 12 rectangle. So you've got to think about the factor pairs for that number. And you've got to look around to make sure that the rectangles that you create don't overlap each other. There's exactly one solution to fit all these things in. So you can talk about factor pairs. You can talk about prime numbers. So when you see a prime number in the grid, a 3, a 5, a 2, a 7, that those numbers have only one type of rectangle. It could be a vertical or a horizontal, but when you see a 5, it's got to be a 1 by 5 rectangle. So you can talk to students about prime numbers. You can talk about composite. You can talk about numbers that have lots and lots of factors
and they have meaning. Like it has a meaning. It is this kind of shape. Yeah.
They do. And so I have found this puzzle type to be extremely, extremely useful, say in a 5th grade, 6th grade classroom. And teachers really, really enjoy using it. And it's a puzzle that I first saw actually in Games Magazine, but it was called Partitions puzzle. But it's exactly the same thing. So I loved that I saw it first in kind of an American magazine, and then I found its origin, Shikaku, which means divide by box. And you're going to find this type of puzzle in Nikolai magazines. In fact, every issue of the quarterly Nikolai magazine puzzle magazine has Shikaku puzzles in it, and they're just awesome. They're beautiful. And if I can say one more thing about it.
Oh yeah.
When you first look at these puzzles, all of the squares that have a circle with a number in them, they have something to them. And what they do is they have symmetry to them. All of the squares that have a circle in them are rotationally symmetric. Okay. They make a pattern that has rotational symmetry to them. And what people may not realize is that that's exactly what we do in crossword puzzles. So if you picked up a crossword puzzle in the New York Times, in your local newspaper, in Games Magazine, wherever, and you look at where all the black squares are, if the puzzle is worth its weight, typically it has rotational symmetry of the black squares. You could turn the puzzle upside down and the black squares would be exactly in the same place. And that's the same thing with a Shikaku puzzle. All of the circled numbers are exactly in the same place. What does that do? That does 2 things for us. Number one, it is a challenge for the puzzle designer to create, right? If I just said, just put in numbers and they all have to fall in rectangles, and those rectangles all come together, and it's actually really pretty simple to do, and it's not that interesting to the puzzle designer. But when you say, now I want you to do it though where it has rotational symmetry of the starting numbers, there's an extra challenge there, and that gets me a little bit more excited as a puzzle designer.
Yeah.
Okay? That's number one. Number two, the other reason for it is it looks cool. It is much more inviting. Okay. It's much more inviting. And in the Japanese culture, there's a lot that they have to do with creating puzzles that have an aesthetic to them.
Yeah.
So aesthetically, it's much more interesting. And I tell students, I want to see a puzzle where it says, come solve me, right? So the puzzle is so cool looking because it's got this symmetry already in its starting digits or in the black squares in a crossword puzzle. It actually helps to draw the reader in, the solver in. And I think that is awesome. I think that is really, really cool.
You know what's great about that? I mean, one, you think, well, that's, part of me says, like, well, of course, they're trying to sell a puzzle. They have to do it. But like, the puzzle is nothing without the solver. right? Without someone to engage with it, no one to dance. If no one's going to dance with you, like it's like me and my sixth grade dance, like just staying in the corner. No, you want to have someone with you, right? So like thinking about the designer has a challenge of not only designing a puzzle that, is challenging, but is also inviting, right? Because if it don't engage, and we get back to this idea of the puzzle is almost a warm demander, going back to some of our language that we talk about with math teachers. We want our teachers in general, we need them to be warm demanders. Like, hey, this is going to be challenging. This isn't going to be just, because anyone can, there's nothing more disappointing than a real easy Sudoku puzzle where it's just like, this is just an exercise. It's not a challenge versus like having something that, I'm challenged. So it's going to be an accomplishment, but I'm still, it's there with me. It's like, hey, yeah, keep going. Like, yeah, you figured that out. All right, now what's the next thing? Keep going. It's like, there is something there. And I love the aesthetic is part. I would never have guessed that, Jeff, but now it makes sense. Like, yeah, come solve me. Let's go. Come on.
You don't want when we were going through elementary school, you don't want a whole page of exercises, right? You don't want just problem after problem after problem. I think that in the puzzles that I sent you that you've already looked at, I tried to do some variations in some of those puzzles. They would have something about them. In many of the puzzles, I try to create them so that there's something about that puzzle that you hadn't maybe seen done in another puzzle before. Maybe there's a number or a direction or a type of a puzzle piece that has to fit in that you've not ever had to use before. There's all sorts of ways that this can be done. And so that becomes the extra little challenge. If you do crossword puzzles and you go to the New York Times crossword puzzles, just awesome stuff. In their Monday through Thursday puzzles and in their Sunday puzzles, they typically have a theme in the puzzle itself.
Right.
So they might have some long words or something in the puzzle that is a connecting to a theme. These long answers all fit together in some certain kind of way. So even sometimes in these logic puzzles, you'll see kind of a theme happen. So, I was talking about Shikaku. That's the puzzle where you've got all numbers given to you, and then you've got to find a way to fill them in with rectangles so they don't overlap. I have seen puzzles where they only use 3s and 5s in the whole puzzle. Okay, not very interesting.
Yeah.
Because a 3 and a 5, they can only be these long sticks.
Yeah.
However, what if you change that up and you use just 4s and 6s? Now you've got lots of other things that you can do, and the puzzle becomes a little bit more interesting. And it actually shows some intentionality on the designer's part to say, yeah, I could just make a puzzle that has lots of different numbers in it, and there's even symmetry in the starting numbers. But when you make a puzzle that has another step to it, a puzzle that doesn't have anything but a certain type of a number or certain placements of numbers, then it gets really, really interesting. And that's a challenge for the puzzle designer. That's a challenge for the puzzle solver then too. And then there's that interplay that you were talking about.
Yeah, I was saying that's the puzzle for the puzzle designer, is figuring out how to do this like aesthetically pleasing or meeting these certain challenges or doing these things and all the different roles that exist in there. Like that's pretty neat, especially when you're thinking about like some of these are either crowdsourced or crowd developed through the Nikolai. That's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
It is really, really, really cool. So you can go online and find websites that have a ton of these puzzles. Say Star Battle, for example. There's a website that has tons and tons and tons of examples of Star Battle puzzles. And in fact, Joel, of each size, of each type, there are tens of millions of examples of those puzzles. Tens of millions of examples. So you can just sit there and go through these, and they're just a neat challenge. There's tons of them, but I can also guarantee those are all computer generated. And I'm not saying that they're terrible. In fact, they're really pretty fun to do. But there's an extra level, I think, that comes from a person designing it. And this is something that Nikolai, as a puzzle magazine, really comes down on, to say every one of their puzzles is not computer generated. It is human generated.
Nice.
Made by hand, drawn on a computer, but not computer created. Okay. And that's where it gets really, really fun. They have another puzzle. It's called Heiru Golf. And your whole goal is you're playing golf, and you're given the starting holes, the starting tees with the ball on them, and then you're given letter H's around the grid where you got to get the holes, the balls into those holes where the H's are. But there are also then water hazards or other types of sand hazards, for example, that may be in the puzzle. So you can't ever land the ball in there. It's got to go over one or around it or something. And then when you're given a ball that, say, it starts off with a number 3 in it, you have to hit the first shot a length of 3 in the grid. And then the next shot has to go down by 1. The next shot you hit has to be a 2. And the next shot after that would be a 1 until you get into a hole somewhere. And so it always decreases by 1, but all of these paths that you're hitting the balls in, they can never cross other paths.
Oh my gosh,
so
that's awesome.
You're just totally limited by how to do this. And what I've seen then in Heru Golf, which means pro golfer, by the way, when these are done, you can see some really great designs that puzzle creators have done. And you can also see like the water hazards that they draw in the grid can be all sorts of different shapes. I saw one that had all like Tetris shapes in it to start off with, or there could be one that spells out something. I mean, they just do whatever they want to do just to make something that is interesting, and it draws the solver into the puzzle.
Yeah. Oh,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And Jeff, I think safe to say, like, maybe we can get some links from you to put some links into the show notes so people can explore some of these things. Or
absolutely.
I mean, obviously, my productivity is going to be going down after I get access to all these.
That's my goal. That is also my goal. I always have to say that when I'm doing a workshop with teachers or something with puzzles, I always have to stop them in the middle of something, and I have to apologize, one, for stopping them because they're in the middle of something. We got to move on to something else. Right. And then 2, I just apologize to say, I know that now this is going to consume some of your free time.
Some of you, yeah.
Some of you. And I always have teachers say that. They're like, thank you, this is really awesome. But now I've downloaded this app for my phone that has all these Shikaku puzzles on it or whatever. I mean, it's pretty cool.
So we talked a little bit before about teaching with puzzles. And so, like exploring and thinking about what the rules are and how can we, and to kind of do what they do in the Nikolai magazine. But what are some other ways that you've seen that teachers or even you yourself have used puzzles in their teaching?
Yeah. So, and puzzles now, I'm going to expand on this a little bit, and they're all kinds of paper and pencil puzzles. And I think that it's really quite interesting to see what people do with these. Right away, when teachers first see some of these puzzles, they'll say, "Oh, I've got this. I have a station in my classroom, and when kids need something, they finish their work early, they need something to do. I've got some of these puzzles there." And I think, well, that's great. I'm glad we can do that, but don't do just that, right? Actually use the puzzles to help teach some problem-solving strategies. Use the puzzles to teach kids how to be tenacious, how to really kind of persevere on a problem. There are lots of things you can do. If it's just something that's just for fun off on the side, it might never reach its full potential. Okay. So, but if you can take some time and really kind of work through these with kids together, generating ideas, making observations, that's where you can really get some mileage out of these. I've also recently, with the advent of Wordle, that's been a huge hit lately in the past month and a half or so, and variations from there. There's a lot that people do working together with kids. So a parent might want to sit down and work on one of these puzzles, whether it's a Wordle puzzle or one of these Shikaku puzzles. Actually work through these with your kids and talk about strategies together. I see this happen an awful lot. Parents have some ideas, kids have different ideas, and kids learn to be much more resilient if they can see other ways to think about something, to work together with somebody. I mean, when I do these puzzles in a classroom, I always do them in pairs or triples in the classroom because kids learn so much from each other, but it's also an activity you can do at home. I've also had, after I've done puzzles with a classroom, I've had kids say, "Hey, I took a copy of these to my grandpa. We went to go see him over the Christmas break or something. And now my grandpa wants to know where he can find more of these. This is really kind of fun. So some people make claims that these kinds of things can be really good for people to keep their minds kind of agile and fresh. I don't have proof of that. I don't have research that shows that. But I think that there's an awful lot to be said for keeping your mind kind of active and always looking for some things like this.
Yeah. What and just playing off of Wordle, there's also all the other variations. There's the Nerdle, that's the equation, or there's Worldle,
right?
Where you have to find. Do you have a variation of Wordle that's your favorite?
So just lately, I've been really doing some of these expansion ones. There's one that's it's Quordle, and so you're solving 4 words at the same time. I don't know if
my son does that one. Yeah, he likes that one. So explain.
So Quordle, you're given, it's Quordle, but you're given 4 5-letter words to start out with, and you make a guess. You make a guess just like you do with Wordle. You guess 1 5-letter word, you fill it in, and it gives you the red and the yellow feedback on letters in all 4 of the words. So now your decision is, do I just keep working on one of these words, or do I just throw out some more words just to get some more feedback? And that's what I do, is I pick 3 different 5-letter words that each one has 5 unique letters in them, and none of those letters is repeated in those 3 words. So I immediately start with 15 different letters. I'll put those out there, and then I'll get feedback on all 4 of the words that gives me information about, if the letter's in the right place, or if there's the right letter but in the wrong position. And then I develop that, and then I'll start working on one of the 4 words, maybe the one that I've already got the most information on, and then I'll start winnowing it down. Well, Joel, there's Quordle. There's also Octordle. So
oh my gosh,
they give you 8. And then most recently, 2 nights ago, I discovered Sequordle, and it has 16.
Oh my gosh,
16 words at the same time, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing new about it. In fact, each one says we based this on this previous one. All right.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of interesting, and I'll challenge myself. All right. After I guess 3 words on an Octordle, I'll guess 3 words. Tordle. I'll guess 3 words, and from there, I want to see, can I figure out all 8 words at that point without missing anything after that? That's my challenge.
That's awesome. I love it.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, and also too, and I think, and I throw it to you, I think the power of this too is this idea of community, right? And so, you talk about the Nikolai, the power of community there in developing and refining like what a puzzle is. And then also with Wordle, like, people are sending, I have my family text message where people are sending their little shared, solutions to everyone else. And like, oh, I got in 3, got in 2, or didn't get it today.
Yeah.
And like, unfortunately, I'm having a lot of those days. But anyway, like there's
I think
the community aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah. The community aspect of this is fantastic. And I think that's one of the real beautiful aspects of this. And as we've been separated and isolated a lot over the past 2 years, I think we're searching for community. I think we're searching for ways to connect with people in different ways. And so I think this is an example. I think maybe that's why Wordle has taken off so much. And I think that's really fun. I think that's fantastic. And so any way that I can use any type of puzzle to help bring communities of people together, I think it's fantastic. And I think it is, I think it's really fun that way.
Yeah. And so, it's education, entertainment, there's buildings of skills, there's the community aspect. Puzzles are good. I think maybe that's the punchline. Puzzles are good.
Puzzles are good. And it's opened me up. I started to learn more about recreational mathematics after I learned about Martin Gardner from that book that I got when I was a 4th grader. I learned who Martin Gardner was, and all of the work that he then was doing with his regular column that would expose people to lots of mathematics that was being discovered in the 1960s and the 1970s, and recreational mathematics that people at home without a PhD in mathematics could kind of really dig into and kind of play around with. And to me, these puzzles do a lot of that same kind of thing.
That's awesome. So, Jeff, I appreciate your time. Appreciate all the, and I gave you a little bit of, I know that you've got a couple books out there that are available. They're on Amazon. They're available.
They are. So it was fun. One time, Joel, I was doing a workshop, a session at an NCTM conference. And after about some of these puzzles early on in my time working with these, and someone came up to me afterwards and she said, "Hey, these are really cool. Have you ever thought about writing a book?" I'm like, "No, of course not. That's not the way my brain works."
Yeah.
And she said, "I work for this publishing company. We publish books for gifted classes, gifted students." And I said, "Well, these puzzles aren't just for gifted students. These are for everybody." She said, "Yeah, I know, but I think this could be something that we could really do." And so working with that company, I wrote 2 books that just show 4 different puzzles in each one of these things. But they are published by someone who sells things for gifted learners, but I don't think that they're just for gifted learners.
Yeah.
I think that they are for a lot of people. And I'm currently working on a book for NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, contracted with me to write a puzzle book. And so I've been working on that. I have 7 chapters completed now. There's one more chapter that I've just got started working on, and then an intro chapter that I need to wrap up. And then sometime the next year, I think this book should be available. So it doesn't have a title yet. I can't tell you that. But the way this book is being set up, different from my other ones, this one is being set up with a page that teachers can use for that inductive reasoning type of thing that I was describing. So it gives you 3 puzzles with their unique solutions and then says, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Then it walks through the development of the ideas, and then each one has like 30 different puzzles, new puzzles to give people to do. And that's what you were helping me out with, to get some leveling of the different puzzles. And I'm getting feedback from lots of people that then I can use to help figure out what are some of the easier ones and what are some of the more difficult ones.
Awesome. So you heard it here, folks. Co-authoring a book with Jeff. It's great.
Well, I'm going to have about 40 co-authors on this book in that respect. So,
hey, and so I'm the open invitation when that book is ready to go. Come on back and let's talk about it. Let's celebrate it and let's talk more about puzzles, because it feels like
fun.
Feels like we got more to talk about. And I always say the big excuse or the big secret of this podcast is not a secret because I say it all the time, is that it's a great opportunity to have conversations with my friends and also share some of the brilliance through the podcast. So thank you, Jeff.
I'm excited. This was a ton of fun, Joel, and I really appreciate your time and putting all this stuff together into continuing this good work.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There it is. There's my conversation with Jeff. I enjoyed having it. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to it. And hey, he's got some books out there. And so there'll be links in the show notes. Show notes can be found at amazonplanet.com/episode 67. So go ahead and look there and we'll put links to his books. And then if it's by the time the new book's out, which might be for a while, hopefully actually we have him on again when the new book comes out. Let's make that the plan. Let's make a little note there. All right. But anyway, I'll have links to his 2 books, Spatial Reasoning Puzzles That Make Kids Think, grade 6 through 8, and Math and Logic Puzzles That Make Kids Think, grade 6 through 8. And guess what? It makes adults think too. And I think there's some pretty amazing, fun stuff in those books, and also some intriguing ways to think about how to teach with those materials as well. So thanks for listening to the podcast. If you were looking to support the podcast, just, you know what you got to do? Go and rate the podcast. Spotify now has ratings. Amazon or it's not iTunes anymore. Apple Podcasts, they have ratings. Anyway, wherever you get your podcast, if there's a way to rate it, please rate it. If there's a way to review it, please review it. And if you think somebody would like this episode, and actually I can think of one person I had a conversation with this past week where I'm like, I am going to send them this episode. I'm actually releasing this episode early because I want to share it with someone who I had a conversation with on like talking about problem solving and how do you teach problem solving, and some of the stuff that Jeff is like, well, there we go. Jeff just brought the answer. And so that's why I love this podcast. I love doing this is because when I have conversation with folks and I'm like thinking about it for myself, and I'm also like, who else could benefit from this? And there's people out there that are benefiting from these conversations. So thank you again for listening. Thank you again for sharing. And again, if you think somebody else could get some use out of this episode, please go ahead and share it. Also, you can look on the socials. We're at Amazon Planet on most social media platforms. You can also join the email list at AmazonPlanet.com. There's many buttons there to join the email list. And then you can also support the Amazon Planet podcast by going to the Amazon Planet store, Amazon Planet bookshop. We got some swag there. We're looking to upgrade the swag in the near future, so that if you like the Be the Good stuff that's out there and you're looking at, ooh, I really want that shirt, I'm thinking about getting that shirt, well, you better get it, because we're going to change things up in a little bit. So you can find the links to the Amazon Planet store, the Amazon Planet bookshop in the footer at AmazonPlanet.com. That's all the way at the bottom of the screen. All right, so again, thank you for listening. Thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.